our nav component can also be pushed in here instead of just typing a normal text. And to create component, or to import components into another component, what you normally do at the top is you import the component name. So let's say navbar, and then you'll see React will automatically detect the name of the component and then tell you the path to which the component is located. But mostly it is import navbar from dot, then you specify where that particular component is located, then you just map it. You don't need to reference the .js to the components, okay? So it's just the name of the component, you specify that, and React should be able to now link to that particular component. If I want to insert or add that component to my app component, I just have to bring the angle tag like the way you specify an HTML element tag, and then put in the name of that component in there, and then use a closing tag. I'm using a self-closing tag, but then sometimes you can also use a normal opening element tag and then a closing element tag, so that in between you can also insert other content within it. So now when I click on save, okay, Control and then S, I should be able to save that, and you can see the link is showing up here, right? Let me take off some effects I have here for the meantime. So we have the nav link showing up here, but then this is what would happen if we want to add some other contents below this. We need to also go back and then add those contents, right? So let's say for instance I want to add maybe another div with a header. I'm not following this design yet, but then we'll come to that. So let's say I want to add another component here, and that component is going to be a header component. So let's do header.js file here. So when we do a header.js file and then we do our RAFCE, we tap on it, this RAFCE will give us this. Let's remove the first import of React, and then at this part I'll also create the header element here, and this is going to represent our header. Now when I put h1 element and say header, it means I need to also insert this header component in the app component before I can have it below the nav component. Okay, so I'm going back there, and then below the nav component I have the header component. So when I press the tab key, when immediately you start typing, it will bring it up. So let's say, let me remove that here. So immediately I start typing, look at that, it shows where the import will come from. So all you do is to press the tab key on your keyboard and it will automatically import that for you. Then I can just simply close this. So when I save this, you can see below my nav I have my header. But there's this one thing you can't do in React components, having multiple parent elements of your component. Okay, so let's say for instance I have this div element here, and then probably I want to add another thing. So I come down here and create another element like a section element. React will not allow us to do this multiple parent element within itself. So let's say I come here and do another h1 and say this is the section area, right? And then I save this. You see already what it's doing here. So it's throwing some warnings, and then some requires a valid value to be accessible. Provide a valid. Okay, so we are still saving this file, and it looks like nothing is showing here, right? It should throw this error for us, but then I think there are some settings we also need to do, and then it should give us that content, but it's not. But then immediately I push this content. Let's cut this content here and put it in the main parent, this place, and then save. It will compile, and then we'll have this content there. You can see it. So you can only have one parent return type in your React components, and then all the child elements can now be within the parent. Okay, so that is one thing you need to know about the React components. And if for some reason you don't want to use an element to wrap your child element, you can also use an empty fragment like so. So I can do this without putting anything inside it. Okay, we call it an empty fragment, and then whatever elements you want to put in here, you can put them here. So let's say I have this, and A2 I have that. There are multiple children, right? So when I save, they will show. But then in the when you review your code, okay, you view your page source, you will see that this will not render as any element. It will not render as an element. The first element it will see is this particular one, and then followed by this one. So that is how React also does it. So take note, if you try to provide multiple child elements, and sometimes the return type could also have a parenthesis like this to wrap your contents in. I need to I think I have not configure my this in here. So now I have my, let me format these things very well. So I have it in a parenthesis like that, like so, and everything is rendering nicely inside it. So this is how it comes, or it shows up on our page. And within a component, anytime a component is created, it has to be exported, right? Because something is being returned here, and this, because it's a JSX where you can write HTML code directly inside the JavaScript code, React needs to actually repack this content and then convert it to an HTML DOM document, and then that is what is going to eventually slot into our HTML page you have in the public folder. So this content has to be exported for it to be actually imported into the main final component that has to be used to render the React files into our HTML static page. Okay, good. So it's installing the npm install I React router DOM to be able to have the functionality of the React router. to be able to use to navigate between the pages we will be creating in our React application. Okay, good. So mine is done installing. So when you go into your package.json, in the dependencies you'll see React Router DOM installed here, and I've installed the version 6.23.1. okay, so I can now be able to create the routing into my various pages in my React app. Now the first thing I need to do is to import this React Router DOM into my component. So, and then what you have to do is that since the app.js is the one that is actually housing or hosting the entire different pages you are going to create, that is where you need to actually wrap your router on. Okay, you need to actually put your router on that particular component, the root component. Okay, so we also call it root component. You need to actually wrap your router on that root component, and that would enable all the child elements of that root component to inherit that behavior of routing, right? So let us first of all do this import, and we are going to import some components of the React Router DOM. And so let me bring it to a new line, and then I'll say from into brackets React Router DOM. So that is what I'm going to do. So I just brought this in here, okay, the curly brace, to actually define the different type of functionalities I needed from the React Router DOM. So the first one is create browser router, and then I also need to have create routes from elements. Okay, we also have create routes from children, and then we are using the create routes from elements. So we'll be creating the elements and then we'll map it to that. That is what I used in this project. And then we'll also be importing routes. Okay, we need also to import, okay, we'll import link, but then we need to also import the router provider as well. Okay, so let's import the router provider. So these are the components we are importing from the React Router DOM. Sorry, this is not it. It's router provider. Okay, this one. So this is what we are importing into our app.js from the React Router DOM. Now, you see, when you import something, it is grayed out. Sometimes it would also be underlined to show that it would have that yellow underline to show that you have imported something into a component but you have not yet started using it, or you have not referenced to it. Even though you have imported, you are not yet using it. So sometimes React will throw a warning in your terminal to tell you, alert you that you have imported something but you are not using it. So it looks like it's redundant, right? So this is why it is grayed out. But the moment we call them out, you will see them light up and the colors will change. Okay, so then before our app function, okay, the function app, we want to create a constant of what? Router, and then that should be equal to create. So we'll call the create browser router function. Okay, so